I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. And if I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Larry Morris of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Larry, can you start us off with some background on yourself?
Oh, I was born in Grand Rapids here on January 7th, 1945, and lived here most of my life. And
what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
Oh, my dad first had a pump. Well, we had the gas station job for a while, pump repair business, and he worked for Lear for a while, and then mostly Bissell carpet sweeper, where he retired from.
All right, and what kind of sort of education and stuff did you have before you went into the service?
Well, with high school diploma, then I served an apprenticeship, which lasted 8,000 hours or about 4 years. And this started out as a high school co-op thing, and they said, "Do you want to be an apprentice?" And this turned me into a college student, more or less, gave me a 2S deferment when I was drafted at age 24, most of my friends have gone and come back, and now it was my turn.
Right. Now, what was the apprenticeship in?
Machinist.
Okay. And where were you doing that?
Well, the Alexander Dodds company where I started out, and then another Rose Patch label bought this company called Veneer Machine Company, and they did everything more or less and stuff, and we were into tape-o-matic or early CN type machines, computer machines, and they had those in the early days. But then I was drafted in February of 1969. This was Nixon talked about after Ted of pulling people out, but just the opposite was happening. When I was inducted into the service at Fort Knox, it was in a sports stadium. The colonel on the stage says, "Normally I'm in a room with 30 people where I'll be able to shake their hands, but this time it's not possible." He says, "This time we exceed all of Fort Knox records by having 1,640 some people being inducted into the military. Here," he says, "this is happening elsewhere." So the year in 1969 and 70 was the escalation, or the biggest amount of populace of people.
Yeah. The largest American force, I think, recorded in Vietnam was in the spring of '69.
Yeah.
And it does go down after that, but it hits its peak there.
After 70, it was de-escalation.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Now, did you have to, when they drafted you at age 24, did you have to go in for physical first, or had you done that years earlier?
Well, you stood on the corner by what's the art museum of the old post office, and they took you down to Detroit, and then you got a physical there. And from there you were loaded onto a bus or an airplane, I think, and flown down to Fort Knox.
Right. Now, when you did the physical, was there anybody there trying to scam the system or get out of it that you noticed?
Well, there were people there that you could see easily that should not have been taken. One particular person that was in the room, and they used to get back in line, and you gasp at the person. There's been a horrendous car accident, some medical operation. He had huge stitches. His body looked like a baseball, literally. And from one end to the other, it's that many stitches. If he goes, everybody. And unfortunately, they were taking people that they would have never have taken. We had a couple of those right in basic training that had rickets, or they just would not function. Those people carried the slow sign around their neck and front and back.
All right. Describe your basic training experience a little bit. What kind of reception do you get when you arrive at Fort Knox?
Well, this is rounding up a bunch of people like a cattle bin in San 56. If you start living together, you see what happens. We we had the basic training of technical schools and stuff, but only a half a day. We're going to Vietnam, so the other half of the day we're getting full combat training out there on the rifle range and stuff. So we were using up all the ammunition for the M14, and the M16 was new, and they had them in Vietnam, and the official changeover date came about, maybe June of '69 or something like that, where I, yeah, June, right, pretty soon, June. I had an M14 in Vietnam for a while, which looked nice, but I didn't get to use, and I got a M16, which I did get to use, but in ways you wouldn't think of, not exactly shooting at people, but near them.
But when you were at Fort Knox, you were still just training with the M14?
Yeah, Fort Leonard Wood, then we were introduced to the M16, but we could only fire one clip. With the M14, they were handing you 16 clips at a time, and you were going out there firing over 1,000 many bullets, which would knock you cuckoo more or less. Yeah, they were using up that stuff. But,
okay. Now, you were older than most of the guys you were training alongside. How does that shape your experience in basic training?
Well, I was older than a captain, or older than the lieutenants by 2 years. And the enlisted people, of course, the people that are going to be in the Army for 20 years, they were older and stuff. But just most of these people kind of wonder who you are and are giving you the mental breakdown test of something, trying to figure out if you're smarter than they are, is what they're afraid of or something. Yeah, but I turned 25. When I left in October, I was close to 26. Your mind is more developed. You're more resourceful at doing things and getting things done without exactly going through the military channels to get things done. It's just who you actually know and stuff. When people ask somebody to do a few favors for them and things, fix the doors on their trucks, you say, hey, you know, we could use a maintenance tent. He said, well, an artillery company next door is moving out in about a couple weeks. Go over and ask them, you know. So I showed up, says, going to use that thing? I said, I ain't used it yet. Want to take it? So.
Well, how much of that kind of thing did you get to learn or put in practice while you were still training?
Well, right away from the beginning, in the training where I was.
I want you to tell us more about your training. Let's try to do your story in order here.
Well, my training was all civilian, where the military's training is at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and they have sort of their way of teaching those guys, but...
Now, I just want to follow your story. Okay.
Well, I was civilian trained, so anything they handed me was elementary, is the way I called it. I could do anything. This is what bothered other people. It's because they're cutting threads and stuff on the lathe and stuff. Some of these lifers would engage the feed, their jaw would drop, and they would just follow. And things running itself, amazing. You know.
Okay. That's still kind of getting a little bit ahead of yourself in the story. I mean, I'm trying to sort of keep things sort of in order. We've gotten you as far as Fort Knox. Now, you had mentioned something about mental stress test or something like that, or what they were they trying to figure out how hard you were to break, or...
Well, no, just the fact that I was talking about once, my cousin showed up, the colonel. They got rid of me, sent me down as an advance party to Phan Thiet.
Okay, but you're still talking about Vietnam. I'm trying to run this interview here so that somebody watching this can understand your story and follow it in some kind of order.
Well, what I was getting to was I only a month or two I began to do super well, know a lot of people, but my cousin, the colonel, came down for a photo op. Shortly after that, I was on the top of the list of volunteers to go down to Phan Thiet when they hadn't asked anybody yet. I'm getting this information from Specialist Harris, the company clerk, was in there. He says they've had a few meetings with people. You weren't in on it, but you're going. So he said those lifers have been going nuts for the last 3 days and nights down in that junkyard putting this machine shop together. They had to take the motor out of a roller, put it up on the gooseneck. So a day or two later, they says, there it is, get in it. We had only our basic duffel bag and stuff that you have, you know, a gas mask and a few things, we throw it in there, and we give us about 35 pieces of old equipment. We go down and get loaded onto an LST in the train, along with a bunch of other people. We ride down to Phan Thiet. We get unloaded down there, and we go up to the orderly room and say, oh, we've been expecting you. Where can we park? Well, down there. So we get parked there, but this move was super hasty. They didn't send us any beds, army cots, pillows, or nothing. We lived in this machine shop van, 11 of us, under it, on it, in it, for about a month, until finally Major Moot came down looking for us. He's wandering around out there. Hey, well, over here, we could use like a tent like everybody else has, some beds. You know, oh, he got us a tent, and then part of C Company began to come down. The rest of everybody was up near Ban Batui, building Highway 21. The company commander, the captain, was in Ninh, which was about 45 miles north of Nha Trang. Nha Trang was close to Cam Ranh, where we could get parts to repair. So they brought all the blown up and used equipment down to Nha Trang, to this third shop maintenance place, to get parts replaced and sent back up. And this was run by Sergeant Patton and a few people, and life was good in Nha Trang. But they were told to go down to Phan Thiet several times, and when I come along, we were the advance party. And then from there, we're to go out to a place called Whiskey Mountain, which the Vietnamese already called Nui Top Dome. They had a name for it, but it's this task force whiskey. And the purpose of this is to start a bench quarry, a rock quarry, and put up an asphalt plant. That's where we're going to work. We're widening and improving Highway 1, which ran all the way from Hanoi to Saigon. The French had built this road, but after War of Independence with the Viet Minh, Viet Cong, this road was completely gone. And in my opinion, this is how the U.S. got their way into Vietnam, by saying, Your Majesty, we can fix the roads, fixes the economy, let us in. We were only there to watch Chairman Mao up there in China. He remembers us from the olden days. And now we're next door. So Vietnam was called the Great War of Attrition, because by 1969 and stuff, we had used up the first string, the second string, and now we're into the third string. And the same thing, unfortunately for us, was with the people in charge, these older lieutenant colonels.
All right. Now, to make this work kind of well, I mean, we have to have some kind of organization. Now, what unit were you with when you were doing this?
Oh, the 864th Engineers, A Company, attached to Headquarters Company, were sent down there as an advance party.
Okay. Now, did you actually train as an engineer?
Well, as a rock crusher, you know, and quarry machine operator at Fort Leonard Wood.
Right.
And I could spell the abbreviation of Corps of Engineers. When you get drafted in Fort Knox, the first thing they fill out pages of, where would you like to be assigned? Well, I said, how about aboard the Haynes in Grand Haven, Michigan? And we used to look at the smokestack and see the abbreviation CORPS, Engineers. I could spell it. So somebody down there, as they're going through paperwork, I didn't even know this, went into the engineer pile, which The engineers aren't represented too much when you see the Vietnam movie, but I asked people when they were watching Rambo or somebody, says, who built that fort, Rambo? Is it who? Combat engineers came out and cleared off the ground a little bit. Engineers construction came along, made it a little better or something, and then they built this thing. Well, the local natives are upset about urban renewal, and so we begin to have a little static, but engineers build these complexes and go on to other places, and they build the roads and the infrastructure, and so there were a lot of engineers. And we're building, they're all working on Highway 1 in various places. They all could be at one stop, but eventually they'd link up. And in the early days, the CIA people got in there and cut a deal to let us in the country, and they were building the Vietnamese the freeway out of concrete. It's about 1/8 of a mile a day, which was killing all these 18-year-old kids with heat stroke and stuff. It just was way too slow. So in 1969, the Army officially switched over to asphalt, which is a much faster process of paving the roads. So that's what we were doing, is widening and improving Highway 1.
All right. Now, to go back again, so you train initially with the rock crushers and so forth. When did they actually send you to Vietnam?
Oh, July 22nd, 69.
All right. And tell us about the trip over and getting to Vietnam.
Well, you ride in a civilian-looking airline, which is not civilian, it's Air America. They just don't tell you. In a 707, and you land in San Francisco Airport, and you go over to Oakland. Oakland, there's this processing place. They loaded us on an airplane, and we flew to Hawaii, got some gas, and took off again, and we're up there for a few hours. We're quite a ways, and the pilot says, I think the oil pressure in that motor is a little left, and that left one over there. We're going to have to stop in Guam. Oh boy, I'm 24.
Don't play with the microphone. Yeah.
Rest of these people are younger, and we had World War II. I had to take this place and stuff. Where is it? And I look out the window, and it's small, but we get close and land. And you land in because it's windswept in like freeway canyons and stuff. Shelters this airplane lands. We pulled up at the Aguna Airport, and the pilot said, "Well, I'm getting off and be back in a half an hour. Anybody, if you want, you can get off and walk around the tarmac and the parking lot here at the airport." And out of 222 people on that airplane, I'm the only one who got off. Walked around. Was tempted to jump in the bushes and run away, but it wasn't a good idea. Got back on the airplane, and then we flew along for a while until we came to this tremendous monsoon rainstorm in the middle of the night, which was bending the wings on the airplane, and our stewardess were beginning to vomit. First 1, 2, and 3 of them, and they all just sat down, and this airplane is bouncing, and figure out how these engines keep running with all this water and stuff. But we did come in Tan Son Nhut Air Force, the holding center, which we got. They tried to get incoming planes with brand new people in them, so we were getting mortared as the airplane is coming in on the runway. They were off to the right by about 100 yards or so, but from there we into a metal shelter with all the rain, and from there you go to the first processing place where they remember your line number, your roster number, and you may be there with a a few people you know, but after 4 days, you're the only one. And so there's more or less the beginning of your experience of Vietnam of being totally alone on the other side of the earth, starting from square one of what to do and how to learn this. And mostly what you found out is you had to learn this from somebody else. Either they liked you or they didn't like you. If they liked you, they kind of showed you the way around. Every noise and sound, what's that? You know, and oh, don't worry about that. It's outgoing round. Oh, outgoing, incoming, difference. All right. And so that's the way people more or less got along. Other people, if they were kind of eccentrics or oddballs, people just left them alone, you know, and stuff. Or they got sent away or put with somebody away from other people and certain things.
All right. Now, how long did you stay in the Saigon area before they assigned you someplace?
Oh, well, I only lasted 4 days down there. That's why I said the other people, a few people I was in basic training with were there. They're gone. Then from there, we're sent down to Cam Bay. And this is the place where they're actually going to figure out where you're going to go for your first assignment. So about 7, 8 days down there or so until finally they tell you the truck's coming and get over there and you're headed down to your first permanent assignment, which was Nha Trang. And I got along pretty well with a lot of people and stuff like that, and they didn't last more than 2.5 months in Nha Trang, and we were sent down as an advance party to secure place at Phan Thiet. And
I think you were talking before we went on camera a little bit about arriving actually at Nha Trang in the first place. But you had to wait a long time before you got the ride, and then.
Oh, no.
Or was that later, when you're sleeping on the truck and the rest of that story?
Oh, yeah, that was down at Phan Thiet.
Okay, that's later.
We were loaded on to put into this old machine shop, man, that came out of the junkyard, which meant that it was DX in military terms. It didn't exist. I didn't have to pull what they call motor stables on all vehicles and stuff before they get in it. They had to fill out a checklist and things. The other people in my tent always had to do this in the morning. I just sat there and they looked at me, who are you? And, well, it's there, but it's not there. So.
Okay, all right. So go back then to Nha Trang a little bit. What unit were you initially assigned to in Nha Trang?
Well, A company.
Okay, so 64th.
64th Engineers, but
okay.
the A company also had an office section called headquarters, an extension from the captain up in Ninh Hao. So this ran personnel, and this was like shipping and more or less handling the material coming in to go up to Ban Batui. So Ban Batui was right where Highway 21 started, straight up and then over.
Now, what was your actual assignment then with A company while you were in Nha Trang?
Well, machinist.
Okay.
In the machine shop there in the maintenance building. And they had just 2 lathes in there and 2 people, Larry Pelton, this Texas person, and me. Everybody else was out in the warm area. They had an air conditioner on this thing to keep the stuff from rusting. So the people were kind of wondering how I got this job right away, easier than they're out there. And but I asked about this machine shop. Didn't have too much stuff, and it didn't have a Bridgeport milling machine. When I began to ask about who's got one, they says, well, the Air Force has got one, but the Air Force is also intelligence, and people in the Trang were having a pretty good time and stuff, and the Army's version, the FBI is the CID, the Central Intel, and so they didn't want you asking any questions or going near them, and shortly after that I was put on the top of the list as volunteers to go down to Phan Thiet and establish the 864th, which during about 9 or 10 months' time, most of the people all came down from rest of C Company, B Company, and D Company came down from Ban Battalion, all ended up at Phan Thiet in the end, and from there they went home. But we got out there, there was nothing out in the mountain, and after about 9 or 10 months, the entire company and everybody was down there. This was headquarters, and then when they show the end of Vietnam, they had some red arrows pointed at various places that the Viet Cong attacked. One of them was Phan Thiet. And so the experience, I spent 11.5 months at Phan Thiet, between landing zone Betty and the mountain. The machine shop van was moved out there and back so many times they would mess up my pay. I would go to the mountain, and I'd be on the LZ. No, that's not. It sounds bad, because this pay officer comes out there and he has an assistant, and they had an accordion file, and they would look through, and if your name was there, they'd pull out this thing, 3 copies. A white sheet for you, 2 yellow copies, one for a building, 2 buildings in Washington, D.C. in case it burns down. And then they would pay you in military payment certificate money. Not American greenbacks. This looked like Monopoly money, and pictures of battleships, of tanks and stuff like that. But they can't have you not having any money. So if you're not in that file, then they were out at the mountain when you were here, so your money went back to Nha Trang. This pay officer reaches in and pulls out a form and says, take this to your company clerk. This is instant travel orders to go back to Nha Trang to get your money. You're no longer working. He says, he fills this thing out. He says, go down to the airport and wait for the next airplane. And so now you get to fly from Phan Thiet down to Cam Ranh Bay. From there, I'm going to have to hitchhike on a convoy or go over to the air traffic control tower and see if I can get a ride in a helicopter, get myself into Nha Trang, and go down and find finance. Just a big building, you know, like a bank, and really like almost a Donald Duck movie. There's this iron cage window, but behind her is money stacked up to the ceiling behind you. My name is Morris. Oh yes, right here. They hand you your money, and now you got paid, and you're in this big town. Should you go back right away? Well, no, you might have to spend an extra day or 2 here and stuff, see some of your friends who were helpful, and when you had to leave this place, Nha Trang, now we go visit them for a while and then fly back. But this happened a few times where I was able to film Nha Trang with a movie camera I bought and take some pictures of the thing for people back home. I tried to make my movie look kind of like a travel log rather than show what was really going on. In the daytime, things look pretty nice around here, but when it gets dark, it's a different story. The war in the South was the war at night. And you could, on this LC where I was, I had friends that ran the LS&A supply company, and they lived right over on the countryside, and we were parked our stuff over on the ocean side, but this right on the beach up on the plateau. And where their hooch was, we had a front row seat on the war. We could see Firebase Sandy, Firebase Sherry, and Firebase Blaze. And these places would get attacked at night where they would turn on the dusters. So every 5th one's a tracer, and they'd be 3 layers high.
And the dusters mount multiple 50 caliber machine guns?
40 millimeter ACAC gun.
Okay.
Them put on like a tank body.
Yep,
This
yep.
is from World War II. We drop in 10 rounds, boom, 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 boom. Right. bullets the size of size D flashlight batteries. Yeah, all the trees and stuff are shot right off to the roots and stuff for half a mile around these places. And you could hear gunfights between people, between the AK-47 or something like a typewriter, the cack, and the M16 was a pop. And you could hear cack, pop, pop, cack. Gunfights between people only last about 10 seconds. It's over. And stuff with automatic weapons fire and stuff, they fire pretty fast. But this stuff was, you know, if you looked for it, it was out there and stuff. As engineers, we're pretty safe, but the LZ had 2 helicopter companies, 2 track companies and stuff. And that was their job, to work the night shift, to go out there, park their vehicles and stuff in different places and have radio contact with starlight scopes, and they're just watching what's going on out there and control the night more or less.
Okay. Now, I think you mentioned when you first got out there to one of these bases, the base got hit right away or with mortars or something?
Oh, well, that was my first permanent assignment in the Trang. The truck gets a flat tire. I go through personnel late. Finally, they says, you got a bed upstairs there in the barracks. And so it was still light out, but it was getting dark shortly. But I walked around outside. So what people were doing, they were showing the movie in a tent next door to this barracks and stuff. The mess hall is directly across us. And the long line of barracks opposed each other end to end, which went for about a quarter of a mile of buildings. Then there was a open little field, but I did notice one of those igloo things. This was a shelter out there. It had like a half a culvert, steel culvert with sandbags over it. Yeah, that's one of those. And all right, now we're laying in bed, and I always had a problem with frequent urination, so I wake up about 2:30 in the morning, and I'm putting my boots on. And I have to walk down the steps over to where Colonel urinal, and boom, boom, down at the end of the buildings. Hey, you guys, do they put like a tank or park some stuff down the guns at the end? Boom, boom, closer. These mortar rounds are coming right up between the building. They just put 5 of us between us. Pandemonium. People run like crazy out of this barracks. Naturally, the side opposite the bombs is 3 deep in the stairwell. We have to go out the end where the stuff is coming. When I went out the door, I was halfway down these barrack steps, and somebody would experience it. Here comes another one, face the wall. And so we looked at the barracks, and this mortar round hit right on the edge of the mess hall, directly across this sidewalk, and then they walked 3 of them alongside of our building. Then they got a direct hit in the combo building, which killed 2 people in their beds, injured about a couple more. This people from the downstairs were running out of it to this shelter I had found. A boy was running alongside that building when another mortar round hit on the top row of barrels and put a piece of something into his head. He ran to this entrance to this barracks thing. There already were people in there. There was a big sergeant standing there at the door or entrance. He said, "I've been hit in the head," and he dropped dead. Now, I come in, plop down, and there's somebody laying there, not a mark on him, and the big sergeant says, "Is he okay?" "No, I'm sorry, son, he's dead." "Are you sure?" "You know, This was my first night. I had actually stepped over somebody. And then after that, not too much happened until well, us as engineers didn't have as many people that were killed and stuff. We were injured, broken legs and stuff. In the early days, the IED was an old person. The Viet Cong would come and find a grandma and say, do you want to watch your entire family die? We'll kill them. All you have to do is sit here with these two wires. When a big one comes along, or I give you the signal, because we're going to be watching you. Just do here. She sets off a mine, it blows up the truck, injures somebody. We go over, and this elderly person, you're not going to beat up, arrest, or do anything to. You may put them, tie their hands up behind their back, and wait for the local police to come and haul them away. This person would be arrested and maybe put in someplace for a week or two, but they're not a rest home. So they let them out, and they're back. We've caught the same person 2 or 3 times in the early days. We were early out on the mountains, so there was a few of us and a few of them. The more of us, the more of them in opposition, the better landmines and things like this. Our trucks all had sandbags of a couple layers near the front part and the forward absorbed shock. And we got some pictures of our 10-ton tractors blown to pieces. The people survived with broken ankles and things like this, earaches and things like this, but the mines were sort of middle-sized. It didn't kill them, but they were injuries. And then Ben Tran province, where I was, had more landmines than all of Vietnam put together. It's the landmine capital. And we had early mine sweeping metal detectors, then a Jeep that had 4 of these detectors that ran remote control and stuff. And we did extensive mine sweeping before we do any construction in the morning and stuff. But in one instance where 3 of my friends were killed and about 7 others, there were, we got the road done from Phan Thiet out to Whiskey Mountain, and from there to the other side. Now it was open country, and this was more vulnerable, the more attacks and stuff like that. But they, with a lot of water in Vietnam, we had to put drainage culverts across the road. You have to dig up one half of the road one day, see if you can get this pipe installed and stuff, cover that up, come back the next day, dig up the other half, and put in the other piece of pipe and stuff so you could keep the road open. And this gives the enemy an opportunity to go there at night and put some mines in place. In this case, they were close to the mountain, about a mile or so out there, and there's a stream, that creek that went through there, and they'd had it cleared out, but they'd hit a huge rock. And it was around quitting time, and when these guys running a big D9 bulldozer had a claw on the back, they hailed him over and says, look, we can't get this rock on hook. See if you can help us out. And he clamped onto it with this bulldozer and pulled for a while, but it was getting close to nighttime to shut down, 6 o'clock, so they couldn't get it. And so the next day, or that night, the Viet Cong came in and they put a big charge underneath that rock. This is the only place where the minesweeper couldn't quite detect. And so the next day, around 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30 or so, boom, this huge explosion. And not normal, and then we see these, the Whiskey Mountain was pretty well established. This was May 22nd. And you see 2 of these more modern ambulances speed down the hill with a 3/4 ambulance slowly tagging along behind the thing. And we knew something had happened, so people ran in that direction. We hopped on a truck and got down to this place close. But there was a lot of personnel down there. This was a project for near Phan Thiet city, so they had civilian engineers out there, 73rd engineers. There were a lot of people in the 864th. There were like 7 people killed out there. 3 were from the 864th, others were Vietnamese civilians. And Johnny Hines went down in there, stuck a shovel into the rock, and was liquefied, as they call it. Other people were blown up, and a person I'd met, a medic, Robert Marther, this guy just came into the company. By that time, we had a mess hall, and when you're out there in the mountain, you have your regular job, but at night you're on guard duty. It's 4 nights a week, a guard roster. You're in this guard tower from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. You get, if you're on guard duty, instead of working a 12-hour day, you get a 10.5-hour day. You got time to get your stuff, go up to the mess hall, get ready, get into that guard tower, so you're there at 6 o'clock. And in comes these new guys there, and this Robert Marther. I says, this guy apparently was a class comedian accountant. He spoke up right away. These other people with him didn't say nothing, but right away, I'm sitting at a table by myself. They get a tray of stuff. They look around at the other few people, and they sit down next to me. By this time, I'm saying, aha, new people. Aha, I'll get to them first before somebody else. So I asked him, I says, these blousing rubbers, I says, we're always losing them. I says, well, what do you do? He says, well, I'm an ambulance driver for C Company. I says, well, I says, no, sooner or later, you probably don't operate or nothing right away. You're going to go for it, and you're going to go back to the LZ, and everybody goes to the PX for something to do down there. And when you check out right by the cash register, these blousing rubbers are hanging on a card right there, $1 for 2 sets of them. Just get me some. All right, I gave him $1, and I talked to him once or twice, maybe after that, but then one day I'd got a movie camera, came from Paysex mail order. I'm putting the thing together, and something, start filming around the corner. Action, comes the ambulance, and he holds up the blousing rubbers. I get a little footage of this guy, and 3 days later, he's killed at this thing. Yeah. He didn't have his flak jacket zipped up. And that's what they tell you, keep that thing together. But he didn't. He was casual, standing around there. The whole something came through and hit him in the heart.
Yeah. So, and actually, and that, I'll just note here for the audience, we have, Larry actually saved a lot of that movie footage that he took, and that's actually in a file that we'll be able to add to what we put up in the archives. You actually be able to, and that part is there in that, so you've kept that.
Yeah, that part there, and that was an incident with 3 people, and mostly after that. But then we replaced a couple of colonels. These people were from stateside, and they were given out Article 15s and for minor stuff and things. People were getting mad at them. And
can you explain what an Article 15 is?
Well, Article 15 is sort of like a traffic ticket, a fine, and if they feel like it, they can demote you or else just take a certain percentage of your pay away according to how severe whatever your incident happened to be, you know. And
so these colonels, they're handing a lot of these things out. They're not very
popular.
Right,
and it was in the bottom of 2 Corps, it was hot. In the daytime, it would be 102 or something, you know. And so everybody was afraid of skin cancer. You had to have a big hat and a shirt. They knew this is the reason why they wanted you to be in full uniform, and especially up around the orderly room. And you're supposed to salute these people when you don't know who they are, and some of them in the early days weren't very military. Well, they didn't introduce themselves to us. The first one we showed, well, they only get kind of big, and you need a colonel, so this guy shows up, but he didn't even come to a few of our formations, never talked to us. start handing out Article 15s, and people kind of found a way to get rid of him, and they replaced him with another older person. These people were all 50-some years old, and been in the stateside and have very comfortable living now. They're out in the most Spartan conditions and stuff, and they're actually having a kind of a hissy or crappy themselves. And so after 2 colonels, finally they got the word and sent a nice young Colonel Engel, a very nice man who came and introduced himself, talked to us and stuff. We got along great after that.
So how do you get rid of a colonel you don't like?
Well, my machine shop man was located way down in the very corner, so I only get the gossip. I was not directly involved in putting some C4 on the colonel's phone, but somebody read it on him, so that was a death threat. When this happens to these people, they leave the very next day or the same day, and that one got replaced with one who thought the first one was kind of a wimp, so he was more strict, and 3 of our biggest boys grabbed him and put him in a box, Connex box with a gas grenade, and so then the military realized they had a problem down there at the mountain, so they sent him somebody who was Colonel Engel, who was a very approachable person. He had black hair. You know.
Right. So he dealt with you like you were people, and you got along with him.
Well, they'd been informed.
Yeah. Well, how much time did you spend your whole time with the engineer unit, or were you also with an MP company at some point?
Oh
or?
no, just the engineers, and most of it was 11.5 months at Phan Thiet, between the mountain and LZ.
All right. Now, you were mentioning before we went on camera, you were talking something about the corruption in the system there. In what ways did you see that, or what were you aware of?
Well, the war was old history. By 1959 or so, it was almost an industry, and the people in larger cities and stuff like this had the black market, the underworld, the things that we could get normally, and here this crude country would pay 3 to 4 times as much. Where one of these small motorcycles, we paid maybe $300, $325 for a big small one back then, when the Vietnamese would gladly pay $850 for that thing in American money, when the annual income in the country is about $80 to $100. So a lot of people were involved pooling their money to buy one machine, but once they did get one of these small motor scooters, it's not uncommon to see the entire family of 5 on this thing with a 60 or 90 cc. They're driving down these roads, dodging rocks the size of watermelons and stuff in the early days out there. So the road was completely washed out and gone from these tsunamis and typhoons, etc., where we had to fill in all the holes and stuff and just get the road drivable enough to put gravel on to get out to the mountain, let alone be into blacktop, and we'll come back and get that paved. So once you got the road paved with asphalt, it's harder to hide a landmine in the asphalt. But that didn't stop them. One day I got some pictures. They got a tremendous tree from someplace that's pulled across the road with a bunch of piles of dirt. And which one do you want to dig up? It's got the bomb in it. So we have to call all the traffic is stopped and call the bomb disposal people. In this case was Arvins and stuff, who put a few claymore mines in this pile of dirt and stuff and blew her up 2 or 3 times until they think they got it all. And so we were being harassed mainly by the local Viet Cong, which is sort of like the same thing as the Ku Klux Klan or something. In these days, the local chapter group were gathered up enough material, and they said, it's your night to go out and put the bomb out there, and you better do it. And
Yeah, and I asked you about sort of corruption and the black market. I mean, did your unit lose things or have things stolen, or could you buy things if you
They
needed them?
sold things. That's more or less what they were selling to the Vietnamese. Between Cam Ranh Bay, which is the main port, and the Trang, our trucks would go back and forth, and some of these people had 5 regular customers on the way back there that were Vietnamese, or paying them in the American money, where one person had enough money to buy a Corvette and stuff. So there were plenty of opportunities. That people, this war had been going on so long at the time. People, when I was just going in there, all my friends had come back when they said, look, this war will never end. It's going to go on forever. And it did last for 15 years. So from early 59 up to 1973. But most of the pullout was after 71. But during this time of 69 and 70, people kind of knew it was going to come to an end. So they were making the best of this, of a bad situation. and they didn't, if you're from fresh into town and older, you could be a mole or a spy or something, and so they quickly send you off as an advance party to someplace far away where you can't see what's happening.
All right. So in other words, you start out at the Trang, but then they get you moved on along someplace. Now, were you ever actually a mole? I mean, did you report on anybody?
Other than the fact that when I did really well in the Trang, fixing anything they could, but PA&E, Pacific Architects and Engineers, is a company out of California that hires civilian people to work for military contractors, people that are high pressure, 300 PSI for these big air compressors for rock drill. The military won't let you touch 300. They won't let you touch super high voltage. They need certified electricians and a few other things like this. And so that their company was backed right up to the 864th headquarters of their shop, to the 3rd shop in the Trang. And Mr. Kim, their foreman, would come over, and I rebuilt sewage pumps and stuff. And Ray Leach was the name of that guy, our director, ran the whole thing, invited me over to his office. Says, you know, I heard a lot about you and stuff. I thought I'd just see who you are and stuff. He had a nice, his office looked like something out of a Humphrey Bogart movie, metal size with these big windows that opened up, you know, on the top of a building. It was in the roof with the building with a lot of windows. They had a big desk and things. And so I was between talking to these people, and I changed my MOS myself, so they didn't know who I was in the beginning, but these other underlings and lifers, when you're a new person and you excel faster than they did, they get pretty jealous because you're talking to superior people. They haven't got a word in edgewise in 6 years, and you're having a conversation with them. And especially if you do good work for them later on, these PXs are sort of like the social point of one of these military bases. And I'd gotten paint for was Captain Boone, later on Major Boone, who needed build another aid station. And I walked around this LC if things were available. I asked people that are using them. I got him 5 gallons of white paint and stuff like that. So now when I'm at the PX, standing there, and all of a sudden this major walks by and, good afternoon, specialist. There's a little conversation with you and stuff, and walks away. And other people standing around, who's that? Why is this Spec 5 talking to a major? Or, yeah, the 2 of them, Major Moot, who came down to find us. You know, so I had conversations with the higher up people. The underlings, the ones that are sitting around these enlisted lifer people, are in their hoots gossiping about us. We're talking about them. And they're a suspect, see, of who this person is. Why does he, what's he here for? And I likened it to the old Danny Kaye movie called The Inspector General, where everybody, who's that, and kind of clean up their act or look around to see, things are all right, and be nice to them, but let's get rid of them. That was Danny Kaye's thing in the movie. They would be good to him for a day or two. He had got free food, free stay, and pull the job again another place. So, yeah, it was just the age factor. And when you're 24 and everybody else is 18 or 19, all of my friends were 19. I had a lot of them never made it to 20, and so. I just called it just refreshingly. These younger people were more happy and didn't worry how brutal he was an old man. I was more scared, more paranoid about things, but the people that were more fun were all these younger people, especially when we go over and sit over on the other side to watch the war at night and things. And so, yeah, they even tried to. I'd been there a long time. I didn't have a short timer's calendar. Out there in the mountain, I missed by getting hit by a few bullets a few times, by a couple of inches or so. 3 of them zizzed by my arm, and I fell over just like a John Wayne movie in the road. A bunch of more bullets. Oh boy, thanks Grandma for all the prayers.
Right.
I'm still here. And yeah, so this is, between me and God, if I make it, but I'm not going to brag about it. Nobody knows when I'm going home except me and the people in personnel. But do you really think they're going to let you leave this place? I don't think so. I had about 11 days to go, and my conscience woke me up. This is an important message from your subconscious who owns your body. Look out, clean up your act, beware. So I did that, and Sergeant Hibbler, I'd been out on the mountain for a long time, and when this Colonel Ingle came along, he moved me back to the LZ, and back where there was a lot more people, and gave me a couple of employees, Jim Christopher and Robert Rupio. And we lived in tents close to this maintenance third shop area on the beach. But we were taken over by a Sergeant Hibbler who replaced this other person in charge. And normally our formations only lasted a couple of minutes. At noontime they counted you to go back to work. But this guy decided he caught a couple of people doing some dumb things and began to lecture us a little bit. But these lectures began to get longer by a minute and a half every day, And we were wondering if this guy is running for a senator back home or orator or whatever his deal was. And I said, he's gaining a minute and a half or 2 minutes a day here. I said, he goes by the 15-minute mark here, going into the yellow, getting close to the red here. And as he creeps past, he went up to about 60 in a couple minutes. So I said, all right, I got to do something about this. And my friends over at LS&A, Michael Smitty or Smith, refueled the helicopters. At lunchtime, everybody came in for lunch, including the helicopters, but after lunch, they would top off the fuel tanks to go back to work out there. And so I presents my problem to Smith. one night, and I says, "Can you help us out?" No problem. So the next day at lunchtime, he's filling up these helicopters. There's usually an attack group. There's 2 Loaches, 4 Cobras, and Huey behind there. He's the captain going to run the crowd, and these things show up at the fuel point flying. They hover about a foot above the ground. He fills up the tank, and as soon as he pulls the hose away, the next one flies in place. And he wasn't afraid to fill these things up, out there, because if you stood up, you would, get clipped. And he kind of presented the problem to the first pilot, told him the location, tents by the ocean, formation, so no problem. He gets on the phone to the rest of them. They're going to have a little fun. So this was not their normal flight pattern for leaving this place, believe me. And they came over, and just at about 50 or 60 feet, at about 1.5 miles an hour, just slowly hover over, making a lot of noise, drowned in this sergeant out. 2 of them, 1, 2, and the third one was a Red Cross one, and this pilot turned that thing right up sideways, giving Hitler a chessy cat smile, and Hitler knew he had been had. And then the other 2 hovered down, and he had to look out at this group of people in front of him, and which one is it? And so he decided he was going to get me arrested for possibly smoking a cigarette of the wrong kind, and the remnants and remains of this stuff, which I had quite a bit of because we were having a good time out on the mountain there, and they moved me back to the LZ suddenly, and I had to do something with this stuff, which I couldn't exactly throw in the wastebasket or anything around it. So I had it in these Ritz cracker containers, like an old-fashioned sugar container, about 8 inches diameter, 8 inches tall, and I had a bunch of these on the under axle of this machine shop van. And I'm down there one day, and Morris, you wanted in your personal area. Ooh. I had already cleaned that up. I'd made my foot locker look like basic training, my socks and tin cans and stuff. And everybody else is messy and stuff, but this was clean. But I had this box that was a bomb fuse box. It's larger than a foot locker that I got from D Company 19th Engineers when they had moved out. And I had all my camera equipment in this box under my bed with a chain around it, because people would sell this stuff downtown for a few dollars, and the camera costs a lot of money, so it's locked up. And Morris, you want in your personal area. I get up there, and there's Hibbler. In comes 2 lieutenants from the CID. Behind them are 2 MPs. And they had a Ziploc bag, which was new, and forceps from the medics. Open that box. I dragged it out and opened it, and there were these leather cases and stuff that, the letter embossed, it already said Canon. Open them. When I opened them, there were these packets of desiccant. And sitting up was the white side, which Hibbler held up to himself, thinking heroin, cocaine, or something. He laid that one down. Of course, the MPs and lieutenants could see on the other side of the bag was written Cannon several times, but Hibbler, going through the motion, opened that second one, and darn, 2 times in a row he gets the white stuff. Then the lieutenants looked at me, and they looked at Hibbler, and the lieutenant moved his pinky, and the MPs opened the door, and they walked out backwards, not saying a word. There was no arrest, nothing happened, so they didn't speak. Now Hibbler hit the roof, He ran down to that machine shop van and says, I want all on, you know, and before, when I was getting pulled away to back the story, I says, look, I'm getting called up to my personal area, Rupio. I says, wait till I get about 75 feet away that I'm being marched away. Everybody's eyes will be focused on me. Says, quickly, run underneath the shop van, grab all those pot cans, stick them in the hole, which was up in the ceiling of this machine shop van. It was an air tank for space. But the floor of the machine shop van stepped up about 10 inches. So the height in the back of this was 5'6". Even if I stood up, I'd hit my head in there. Hibbler was 6'3". Rupio had put everything into that hole. Hibbler had come down and searched that entire van for an hour and a half in the heat. He's sweating in there, pulled every, couldn't find nothing. And just left. So yeah, and then finally the day comes for me to leave, you know, and most people say I couldn't wait to leave, and all these other feelings. I was, after 14 and a half months, I was indifferent. At that time, I said, well, what's ahead of me, I don't know, and actually just beginning to know this place. Now I got to go home.
How was it that you wound up being there for 14 and a half months?
Well, I extended.
Okay.
Me and the Army weren't getting along too well at all. In the beginning, they're being older than that, and these lieutenants and stuff, when you salute them and all this, you know, these young kids that are 19 and stuff, and running around Fort Leonard Wood, and you know, they go nuts if you don't salute them. Yeah, so we get to Vietnam, and the first thing I did was extend. I says, look, and if you extend, this cuts 2 days off. So if you join the military, it's 3 years. If you're drafted, it's 2 years. If you're drafted and extend in Vietnam and take 70 days off or whatever, this is about 5 months' time that you would have to spend back in the stateside, or they're not going to make you general. And this was part of Hibbler's thing, is I had early on, with this machine shop van, I had had a couple large hunks of steel I'd brought down from the Trang that, you know, when they told us to get in this shop van with our stuff, I said, I need some stock. And there were a couple of 6-inch bars about 8 feet long. I said, look, you guys, cut me off a couple of chunks big enough for what you can carry and throw them in the back of the van for me. So I've been carrying these things around for a while, but apparently somebody knew I had them, and Colonel Martin came down one night. This was when I was back on the LZ. He came down with 7 jeep loads of personnel. He climbs up on this machine shop van and had like jail bay drop down planks to stand on, and puts his arm around me. Son, can you help us out? And he showed me this hitch from a 60-ton road packer, 3.5 inches in diameter. They broke in half because somebody said, then a young man tried to drive the bulldozer off the shoulder of the road and extend this thing in the air for a couple of seconds. And he broke her off. Can you help us out? And I looked at them hunks of steel on the floor there, and I said, boy, I got 2 of them. I mess up one, I got a second chance here. But so I had heard already other people got promoted for various things in Vietnam. You could get promoted because this is a war zone fast if you did something exceptional. In this case, up near Ban Batui, they were hauling new people up there, driving a deuce and a half, and they had to go through the pass up there, this notorious place where curve in the road where the Vietnamese could sit on the other side of the rocket and get you as you came around the corner. They had a pretty good shot at you making the curve, a slow curve on the hillside just cut out. And rocket gets fired, these guys, the deuce and a half didn't have a top on it. So they jumped into the back of this thing. They're doing about 35 miles an hour on an asphalt road, though it's paved. jump, y'all. And I jumped off, took the truck. The deuce and a half gets hit by the rocket, blows the front left tire and the radiator and stuff off the thing. But these people did 5 or 6 somersaults down the road, got skinned up a little bit, but the people that were up in front driving the truck, as soon as this deuce and a half wasn't traveling by itself. It was a small military convoy with the cadre or lifers people in a jeep right behind this thing. And so as soon as these people stopped tumbling down the road and began to stand up, a big sergeant said, "I promote you here now." And turned these people into Spec 5s. Now they can't come into our E4 and below club bar, you know, and stuff. So you do learn that you can get promoted. So when this hitch come along, I says, "Oh boy, more money, Spec 5." So Lindbergh could fly the Atlantic. I stayed awake for like 36 hours. Running gas, you people are screaming at me. Some of these people in the middle of the night were kind of spaced out. "Shut that thing off a second. Think it's loud there. Come on up here where I am." M16 right there. Come on, dudes. So anyways, when I finished this hitch in less than 2 days' time, more or less, you know, but I was sweating and cuckoo. When I got it done, I said, "Now I have to go find me a lieutenant." So I didn't have to go too far, and I ran into this lieutenant, which I thought was a pretty nice guy compared to some of these tin horn officers, Lieutenant Luter, who later on became a commander and stuff. So, "Lieutenant, sir, ever talk to the colonel?" "No." "Do you want to talk to him?" "Yeah." I says, "Well, remember a couple of days ago, you're all down there with the colonel and the hitch?" I says, "Well, I got it done." I says, "Look, if you had an Army requisition this thing, it would have taken 5 months at the most to even get it here, and it's here." I says, "Take this thing up to the colonel and show it to him up there in the mountain, and mention something about a promotion and about how, you know, you got the thing done." So Lieutenant Luter goes for the idea of being able to, "Sir, I've got the hitch." The colonel, "Outstanding!" Yeah, and something about a promotion. "Permission granted." So I became a Spec 5 in about February when I come into the country. In July, it's a slicks leave. And this made people jealous of me, and especially Sergeant Hibbler. They said it would have taken you a long time to make this rank in stateside. And if I did not extend in Vietnam and went back to one of these forts as a Spec 5 with low seniority, they would have taken that away from me. This was their job. And Sergeant Hibbler was going to see to it that it happened before, because he knew I wasn't going back to Fort Leonard Wood or someplace. I was going home. And so, yeah, and then so I extended, and when I was drafted, I was in with a bunch of just young children and some of these black people, kids right from Detroit ghetto and stuff, and me and them didn't get along. I'm 25, 24, they're 18, you know, so we had a little friction and stuff, but a guy named Prince, more or less, he's the leader of these dudes. They're pretty aggressive. This person wanted to, you know, get in a fight with me. They was going to stab me in the can one time. We almost come in to pull it on the razor blade and shit, you know. And but I just stared him down and backed off. But now Vietnam was over with, and these guys extended too. So we get down to this holding center to get on the airplane. You know, and for the first time, I ran into the center and run right into Prince, and you know, right away we just grabbed each other. I said, "You're a fine-looking young man." These people have just changed immensely from children to good-looking adult people. I says, you know, and we just hugged each other instantly and stood back and, you know, we called each other a couple extra names, damn it, you know. He's from Detroit.
Yeah.
And yeah, then we get on this airplane, but a lot of us, you know, say, look, man, we made it so far, but this airplane, we didn't check the oil on it, or how much gas is in the tank, or who's driving it, or how much sleep he had and stuff. And they're a civilian-looking airline, except there was one letter different in the name up there. Braniff had a couple extra E's in it or something. This is Air America, you dummy. The CIA's airplane. And so when we got in this thing, you know, another 707, and the thing lifted off, a few people began to make some whooping noise, but the rest of them all just turned around and cool it, dudes. You know, we ain't checked the oil in this thing. And when we see the coast of the USA showing up into the windshield of this thing, you know, out the windows, then people did make a lot of noise and stuff like this. We're finally back, and that was in Fort Lewis, I think, Seattle, Washington. Yeah. And we had to stay there overnight, you know, the same thing, transit barracks and beds with no springs, and the next day they just were anxious to get out, so nobody knew anything about PTS or filing any claims. If you were in the Navy with all the scuttlebutt and language that you people like this file the first day, you know, we're glad to just get out of there. So the problems that you have with just leaving the place are subconscious for a long time. See, first of all, you don't realize what's really wrong is you miss all these people that were your immediate military family are gone. And now you're back in a world that's indifferent. If the people back there don't have a direct hookup with a person in the military, that's somebody that they actually know, then they really don't care. It's not, the war's on the other side of the earth, and they tried to keep this war as quiet as they could for a long time until during the time I was there was all this protest and stuff. The day we're getting attacked out there in the LZ was the same thing when the Kent State incident took, I'll say, attack on LZ on May the 5th or something would have been a more front page story than something happening at a college and things. So the war was unpopular. And yeah, at Union High School, we had Lieutenant Colonel Keith Houston, U.S. Army retired, a history teacher. And the colonel was different. The colonel was sexist, of course, stuff. He'd come right out with it. And we got a new class of people, and he'd look around and said, "Who's the prettiest girl in the room?" Says, "You're going to be the secretary. You're going to sit up next to me, and the people will look at you, will look at me, instead of looking at you all the time." So if you were the best looking girl, you were in for it. You couldn't, you weren't, no didn't mean anything to the colonel. Get over here.
I'd like to kind of go back into Vietnam and have you talk about a couple of other themes. You mentioned, for instance, you had your own supply of marijuana and things. How common was marijuana use in your unit?
Oh, the drugs were rampant. And being a Christian and people with good sense in Grand Rapids, so alcohol, bad, you know, beer and pot are elementary, but there were several other drugs in Vietnam had what we call the drugstore, they call the chemist. And believe me, this is the chemist. And they sell narcotic barbiturates. The thing called the Benoctol, this thing was the size of an Alka-Seltzer tablet, had a split in the middle, and this is you know, it's an opiate, you know, it's a barbiturate. This thing is like an aspirin, but if you have a migraine headache and we take an aspirin, this thing was an atomic bomb for your headache. It's a you know, a narcotic, and the people that worked in the orderly room and stuff. All their friends can smoke pot and drink beer and have a good time, and they got their own personal vehicle, sneaking around and having, getting away from the army. But if you have to work in the office along with these lifer people, you can't do that. So these people were taking these binoculars, so it made them feel like they drank a case of beer. But these were highly addictive. At first, a half of one would do you up for a couple of days, and then a whole one after that, or one. People were up to 11 and a half a day.
And where were they getting these from?
From the pharmacy downtown.
Okay, so from the Vietnamese.
Right.
Yeah.
And between the binoculars was the narcotic barbiturate, then the other one was liquid speed, obesitol. This was a small bottle, 4 ounces or less or so. It had on the label, looked like the red and white fishing bobber, only this was a person's head with short arms. And this was for obese, but if you...
For weight loss, yeah.
Right, but people, I never messed with this stuff, but if you took a couple of swigs of this stuff, this was liquid speed. And people out there filling sandbags between guard duty and filling sandbags is what most people do all their life in the military, keep improving their house. But this fella's saying, he gets with this new company, these boys are running around, they're smiling, they're filling them sandbags, they're moving like crazy, building sandbags. And what's with this guy? It's this stuff right here. Try it. A couple of swigs, and they're out there. So obesitol was, and these people were careless. It's like if you drink and drive, you don't know the sheriff to find the evidence, don't throw your beer cans along the road. Well, these dummies are throwing obesitol bottles out the window of their army truck. So they're in the ditches, Occasionally, you might find a joint in the road or something like that that fell out of somebody's pocket. But there was that. And then there was pure opium. Now, these people that ran this supply company and stuff like this, they were into drugs, intravenous and stuff. And these people, you have to looking for rattlesnakes, turn over rocks to find them. But these people trusted me. It was sickening to watch people shoot up and things with opium out of the thing, but I did have their confidence. Mm-hmm. I know when I was in there watching them, I could remember a Christian Reformed minister, religion. God, I says, but wailing to these people isn't going to do anything. Mm-hmm. Just watch. Mm-hmm. So there were several drugs if you wanted them and things like that, although we were not into the combat stuff, but people in Marines and stuff were using heroin. Mm-hmm. It's a painkiller. If you lose a few friends, this is going to knock you off your feet, as they would say, but if you're pickled enough on this stuff, it doesn't bother you as much. You're going to hang on. Got your senses, things like that. But it depends, just your intelligence. Although a lot of people did commit suicide over several things. So we had an epidemic of suicides out in the mountain for various reasons among these young people. This was part of the reason why these colonels were getting kicked off the mountain. They were just far too strict, causing these people unnecessary problems. When this happened to enough people, you get a vigilante society that does something about it in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's just one person that took the initiative, but had been talked about enough. I think so. And there were no MPs out on the mountain. They were too scared to come out there. So, and it depended. There were we listened to, always curious to what happened later on. See, once after I left in October, from there on, this is partially the reason why Sergeant Hibbler was after me, because I was safe back on the LZ. Things began to get a lot worse. These helicopter companies on the LZ went home and left them with no helicopter protection. Mm-hmm. So the helicopter companies gave the engineers a couple helicopters. these track companies pulled out and gave the engineers, we ended up with 8-inch track vehicle howitzers, quad 50s, 40 millimeter, all the stuff that most infantry units were having. We had this stuff out trying to build this road past that mountain. Well, it was no man's land, an open season for the Viet Cong out there. And then later on, we wondered where they all came from. But out there, about 10 or 15 miles, was a huge lake and a reservoir and stuff. So they could hang out by there with a lot of water whenever they got in the mood, come on over. So, yeah, things did get a lot worse for the engineers till finally they did pull out and turned it over to the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese were moving out there, the military people with their families. LZ Betty turned into LZ Bronson, which the Vietnamese used as an airport for about 10 or 15 years. After that time, the erosions, the place was coming apart, and they knocked all the buildings down and leveled it. Then it was off limits until about 2005. So now several people have gone back to LZ Betty, just with nothing but a little bit left of the runway and stuff, and it is completely eroded away. Where canyons, at least a half a mile and stuff, these erosions. And it rained more when we were in Vietnam is because we were seeding the clouds over there to make it rain, to wash out the road for the North Vietnamese. So, yeah, I've got pictures and stuff of these monsoon rainstorms, and one of the cases, one of these huge guard towers that rained so hard the water washed the dirt around, the people fell over, the guard tower came down with the people in it.
How much contact did you have with the Vietnamese civilians in your area?
Well, we hired them. The LZ was a big place, so that place had up to a couple hundred employees. We don't make our beds and we don't wash our clothes because we can hire Vietnamese girls to do this. See? And the same thing with KP duty. You can hire Vietnamese to do the KP. So these are hired by people in our tent, a squad leader or somebody going downtown. And then most of this is washing our clothes, but the inner structure of the LZ had garbage collectors that were Vietnamese men, had electricians. We had a water purification plant, and this was run by a Vietnamese civilian, and various other people in there. This LZ had 10 or 12 of anybody you could think of militarily, plus the Green Berets lived underground outside the place in their compound. You couldn't see, but they're out there. So there was this mixture of Vietnamese. Now, these civilians were threatened by the Viet Cong to get as much intelligence as they could from what was up there on the LZ and stuff like that. And when they would attack us, they would make these people go along with them. The people that worked there in the daytime were right out there with the attack crews and stuff. And this one older guy was an electrician. We all liked him and stuff, but we ended up killing him one night. It was, and so there was this mixture, and then the city of Phan Thiet, there was no way to get off the LZ. We had to drive through this. So this was on limits in the daytime, but not at night and things. So we convoy through the town all the way through there, and when you'd be on guard duty and stuff like this, you had from 6 in the morning till noon to where you had to go back to work. So, and you're supposed to go back and go to sleep or something, but instead of that, I would run down to the point, the driveway where people are lining up to go back to the LZ, and anybody need a shotgun? Yeah, somebody to ride in the front seat. So then, we'd ride back to the LZ, and if it was somebody you knew with, you might get a ride back. You ride back with them. But if it was somebody you didn't know, you just have to, around 10:30, try to think about going back out there, because you're supposed to be back there by noon or 1 o'clock at least, and they go back to work. So, yeah, and then you go in there and go to the PX or go find Smith and a few people and get some supplies for the rest of the people and go back out to the LZ and things. But on the way back, now it's 10:30, 11 o'clock, we have to go through several intersections in the city where there are groups of about 20 people standing in a circle, and they got 6 or 7 bodies laid out on poncho liners saying, "Who is this? Your brother, uncle? Anybody know these people?" And they're not wearing nothing. They're naked. They only got on a pair of faded out boxer shorts that are so old that they might at one time had some color. Now they're just the color of gray cotton. And you know, you pass about 3 intersections and stuff like this on the way out. Now these people have been killed out there somewhere in the countryside, or the people in their homes at night, and all of a sudden they have a gunfight in the backyard and stuff, and they don't dare go out there. They might hear somebody moaning, but they don't dare go out and help them. If they go out there, whoever shot them will shoot them. So but as soon as it gets daylight, they go out there and drag this body out to the edge of the road. And then the national police or somebody will come along, collect these people, bring them into town, and figure out who they are.
And was the violence, is this done by the Viet Cong, or is it by criminal groups, or?
Well, this is fights between whatever's happening at night, these gunfights that are happening out there. Some of these, we said, it's all the way between disputes between people themselves and Viet Cong and you know, trying to get into this town. Now, Phan Thiet was part of what they call the Ho Chi Minh Trail, had 5 or 6 fingers that spread out, and they were following this water trail down. Phan Thiet's pretty sandy and stuff, so eventually people had to get near this river or this town to get some water or go out to that reservoir someplace. And behind it, the place what they call Disneyland, is part of this forest. There's a guy that owns Easy Russ's, it's an auto parts motorcycle junkyard off in the Panel Road there. He drove a tank outside right behind the LZ, or Whiskey Mountain and stuff. I didn't know that at the time, and his tank had a plow on the front and stuff, because he was the first one and stuff. He hit an anti-tank mine killed a couple people in his tank that were sticking out the top and stuff. And the tank had a big smile on the plow in the front there where it hit the thing. And a lot of people had been to LZ Betty and around the area and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Now, to go back to the Vietnamese, you mentioned that you had somebody in your unit who could speak some French.
oh yeah, that was back up in the Trang, Jerry Campbell, who had 3.5 years of high school French. And this was during my first only 2 months. We would go downtown in the daytime, and he was talking to these French people in French, and they were mostly just talking about daily life and how hard it is to exist in this economy, and how sick they were of the war and stuff. But the Trang had all these American GIs in the thing. This is on the street, you're not popular. But once we were in this person's house and stuff, I'm in there, and there were pictures on the wall, but all of them were studio. I said, these Oriental people, we don't have any straight-on looking pictures. They're all isometric or a photo, view. And Jerry Campbell's talking to 4 or 5 adult people, and they're only having a conversation in French. But these Vietnamese don't touch, they don't wave, and their dress gestures are much different. They live on the other side of the earth, so they're not Caucasian. But I'm sitting there drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette in the corner and stuff, and this people's wife noticed I'm sitting there alone, so she comes over to me, and using French gestures, she puts her hand on my arm and forearm and stood me up. Bitch, Orientals touching you? No, this is French gestures. And she takes me over to the mantle. This house had, a French built it, they have to have a fireplace from Moana's picture or something. It was a fake fireplace with a mantle. And there are two small pictures of their boys who are Arvin soldiers. That's why we're in this house. These people have sons that are our age that are in the Arvin, the Vietnamese army, and they haven't heard from them in 8 months, the other one 11 months. So there are pictures. Next to the picture is a pack of Salem cigarettes. This is an offering to Buddha. And she says to me, these are my two boys. I don't know where they are. We haven't heard from them. She says, I only hope that someplace, somewhere, they are in a place like we are in this room today, having a good time. And sits me back down. That doesn't stay with you. So I have these experiences in the training, see, but people are suspicious of me talking to these people. That's why you get sent down to Phan Thiet as an advanced party, and they're, you know, glad to get rid of you. And Phan Thiet was truly an adventure, going out to that mountain, pushing off the overburden, staying out there. You looked at that place and you said, this is as far away from the civilization as I'll ever get. I don't want to go out there, but once you're out there, there was no MPs, a little easier life and stuff, people, more friends, people are a lot more relaxed, no shirt long. We have a pretty good time until a few colonels come along and stuff. Oh, yeah, what was my thought about going out there? Yeah, just the freedom of being there and coming back. I forgot what we were talking about a little bit.
Well, I mean, I was just having you fill in some other pieces of the story, but basically in your longer story, I mean, we've gotten you back to the States, and you get discharged right away when you get back?
Yeah, and at that time, even to begin with, see, my friends have all gone back. A friend, Paul Winkler, was on the Coral Sea and stuff of the aircraft carrier. And I'd been out to San Francisco to see him in '68. And so they had an apartment in this building, this house that was the last time I saw it on TV was a Guatemalan embassy, but this house that this Michael Anderson and one of Paul's friends, these kids were problem children, and they had been sent to a few special schools that were impossible to get kicked out of, but they managed to burn their rooms down. And they were living in a house that was twice the size of the Voigt house. This thing had 5 stories, was built into a very steep hill. So the basement, you could walk in on one side, the other side was a wall. This thing had the most beautiful woodwork I'd ever seen in my life. In its hallway, as you went to this thing on the sidewalk, there's an angle, some steps, a flat, more steps, another landing up, and the big oval glass door for the coat room. The hallway is about 10 feet deep. From there, you looked at this long hallway with this beautiful staircase to the left that went up, turned sideways, went up, and turned up onto the 2nd floor. This was a fun family home. It was 5 stories tall. And so this was rented out into 11 different apartments and stuff. And so Paul says, hey, look, man, you're going to San Francisco. Stop off and see Michael Anderson before you go. So I sees him in the apartment. He gives me some pot, you know, and I fly on the airplane. But then when I came back from in Seattle, you know, this Paul was living down there in the same building. He had another apartment. He was selling weed. So yeah, instead of going straight home, which was nothing, so I stayed in San Francisco for about a week or so. But to go back way in the beginning, see, this war was not going very well. If you'd watched it on the TV set in '68 or so, we were killing 300 and some odd people, 200, close to 300 a week are dying over there. So, you know, this apprenticeship, see, it ended October 1st of '68, you know, and I went down to the draft board, you know, I'm registering these guys, and I says, well, how long is it going to take me? Well, they says, well, the way the things are going in the government, it might take them about a month or so to figure out, get your file and stuff like that, and then once that gets processing through there, you got about 45 days, more or less, so, you know, so, and, you know, so in the meantime, I entertain myself by talking to the Marine recruiter and a few of these other people and stuff, and you know, and then getting kind of nowhere. And people had already informed me what what these people were about and things. So yeah, you just get drafted, you know, and go. But
did you have a job waiting for you when you came back? Or
no.
Not? You just had done the apprenticeship,
There
but not
was
a job.
the economy was done for with Ralph Nader and that era, where the joke was the only significant change in a new model car would be on the title. They didn't want to, so the die shops and machine shops weren't doing anything. We were in a recession. You couldn't buy a job in the die shop. These Snelling and Snelling agencies had die makers as thick as the New York phone book and applications. And when I went to a rose patch label, I cruise in there, and it's pretty quiet. There are no employees. The two department heads are looking at each other, who's going to go next and stuff. So we were on unemployment for the longest time, a year or two, until finally, through a friend of a friend, got me a job at Ranger Tool and Die at night for a while, which is not the best place. And I'd had my application in all over town. I've been so many places 3 times. And, you know, I cruised, you know, they call up their personnel, you fill out a form, and they keep it in their file, and you come back and say, look, dude, I've already been here one time. Says, you know, you got your own system, but put a mark on my file, a 2 or what the hell, your system, there's to note that I have been here for a second time applying. And so it was rapid die, I'd been there 3 times. And this like almost this incident with Hibbler and stuff. I was out there and working a night shift at Ranger, and this night shift, boy, when lunchtime came, they'd jump in the car and thing a fishtail down the road, both of them. Go down to the bar at Standale, get really drunk and stuff, and come back. They'd be lighting your shop rags on fire in your back pocket. Somebody went into the can and wrote some graffiti about Mr. Rapp, the foreman, and he comes out, sees that, sticks his finger right in my face and blaming me. And I know who did it, but I ain't gonna say, you know. And that got me really mad, you know. I said, look, you dumbbell, you don't know who you're dealing with. You stick your finger in my face. You know. So this darn place, you went to work at 4:15 in the afternoon and got out like 3:45 in the morning, some crazy hours, you know. And so now I get back to this little house I'm renting, and I'm laying on a bed, passed out really big time, and about 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone is ringing. I can barely hear it, I'm so sleepy. I crawl over to the thing and picked it up. This is Kay at Rapid Dime. Would you like to come down for an interview? So I got hired and left Rapid. I'm Ranger. Oh, you can't do that. Yes, I can. You know? You morons. And but this place turned out, this is the meanest, cruelest place in the city to work. Believe me, Rapid Die. And I mean, old alcoholic Jim McGarry. His name was Harold. If you called him that, he'd hit you. And they call him Jim. And yeah, this was, we were in build injection molding, and this die shop was built by George Leonard, who started out in Detroit and told people he was a die maker, but he wasn't too good at it. He got fired. He was fired 10 times in a row. And the 11th time he owned the place. And he had built 4 die shops in Detroit. And so he started Rapid Die over in Grand Rapids, the first mold shop and stuff. So they were pioneers in plastic mold before anybody in Grand Rapids ever built anything that wasn't a mold. And yeah, this was full of a bunch of, you know, characters and things, but you had to work 10 hours a day. If you did, you're out of there. And being a veteran, and either being employed or unemployed, was, you know, and yeah, that's what we were talking about at the beginning when they were talking about getting drafted and things. This war was not going good. So, you know, I had a car and a dog and lived with my parents. And I go out with a couple girls on a second date, they're asking you to marry them. And I says, huh, a nice compliment, but do you want to live with your parents? Do you want to live with my parents? This isn't their idea of getting married. They don't watch television or care about the war. And I'm going to the Army. I mean, I don't want to, you know, but I'm going. So I put this off, and this probably wasn't the, you know, I didn't have any money. No backing from parents or nothing, so, you know, you just tell them, look, I afford gasoline and dog food for my dog, you know, let alone getting married at this time without any great support of family who wants to kick in a bunch of money to help you out or something. It's not there, so, you know, when you do come back and stuff like this, it's, you know, you're 20, almost 26, you get a job finally, you're 27, 28 and stuff. And, you know, to try to find somebody, a girl hooked up and married, divorced, a bunch of goofy stuff you didn't want to get complicated with. It's just, you know, there aren't anybody left. And I had no problem with very young girls and stuff like this, but, you know, I'm 10, 11 years older than them. And out on the mountain, boy, we lived on sea rations for 4.5 months out there. When I was 25, I weighed what I weighed in the 11th grade when I was in the wrestling team and had to weigh 137 pounds. A lot of people in the movies, if you look at these people, how thin they are, is because of the extreme heat and living on sea rations or, you know, no other junk food and moving around constantly all the time in the heat. So everybody was in really good condition. That's what I said. Most girls would pass out over here at the sight of, oh, these good-looking boys, especially, you know, I'm 20, 25, and, you know, these kids are all growing up where they have their natural body and haven't gained any extra fat yet. And so, yeah, when you come back and people look at you, you're 27 and never been married, what's wrong with you? They'll tell you something crazy. I said, well, look, dudes, you know, I didn't think it would be a good idea. I says, you know, coming back, if you got a couple of pieces missing off your body, that really isn't fair to your person you married, because they never seen you. I mean, a couple of weeks, got married, went over there and come back, and now you're half there or something, and this is not, you know, usually these things don't last too long, and it's not a good idea. So that was more or less, I found a few girlfriends, but more or less they just surprised I got a couple of kids or something, and they were more interested in their welfare and alienating me from them and things, so you just end up alone, you know, more or less at an older age, and just tool shop I worked at. I worked there for 34 years, but the 207 bubble between all the housing, hedge market and things actually stopped these tool shops, which used to work even on Sundays. So the economy was, so I was laid off permanently at age 62, and I'm supposed to go to age 67, and didn't have much money or anything planned. They just says December 28th of that 207, you're done. Happy New Year, So the unemployment of all 208, and for unemployment, you go around to these shops, but who's going to hire somebody who's this old and stuff like that, so you fill out the forms. After a while, you have to go visit some of these places, and you show up. Only one of these places over here south of town here. It's a pretty nice looking personnel guy who looked at me and said, we're pretty good shape. We just may hire you. He signed the thing there, and then finally Social Security, and it was that you had a job, which you had to be there all the time, more or less, and these die shops are highly competitive, and the pressure, the people that are running these things got these people, the die chasers, the people that are contract and get the job, and they aren't exactly truthful with you. Right. They'll tell you the job needs to be done in 4 months, or 2 months or something. 4 months usually it takes a while to build these molds. Sometimes 4 or 5 months, but they'll just move the date up a couple months, and the person building this thing killed himself building this mold to get it done on time.
Now, of course, our interview here, this is really kind of about your military experience.
Yeah,
you kind of got pretty well through that. Overall, I guess to look back at it now, what do you think you took out of that experience? Was there a positive side to it, or did it just mess up your life?
Well, it was just a big vacuum. You come back, you're glad to be employed and stuff, but in this tool shop, see, I did sort of the meanest, hardest job there was in there, because nobody wanted this job. Running a horizontal boring mill, which in the old television, it would say, what's the most dangerous job in the world? It was Icelandic fisherman, or bomb disposal, Icelandic fisherman. Number 3 was milling machine operator. And that's what I did. And the horizontal boring mill is a large sideways drill press type machine capable of milling. Nowadays they're completely CNC and stuff. But the one I ran was manual, and this is a big table. Everything you load on this machine is loaded on with a crane, overhead crane. You're not going to put too much on there by hand. And so running the boring mill, at least it kept you, you got employment and stuff, but it was a lot of physical work. If I didn't move, this machine don't move. Stuff. And running that thing until more or less you're getting outmoded by CNCs coming along. And,
and then sort of, how is that? Is that a byproduct of having been in the service? You were just willing to take the job even if it was a hard one?
Well, you got a job, and even back then, between smoking a little pot, these people didn't care. The people in these die shops, you mean nothing to them. If you work there 30 years, they could care less. And that's the way it was right up to the end, so you got a pretty good job. It's pretty easy. Anything you hand you and stuff, it just more or less came to where the work ran out.
Right.
And then you're sort of left alone for, when the money runs out and girlfriends run off and stuff, so now you're alone. And But the only thing I got really is all these memories. In my case, I have all kinds of slides, color transparencies of things, and some of this stuff I converted into DVDs and stuff. And then the 864th Engineers, it has an alumni association. The 864th was created in World War II for build runways for the Air Force, was split off from the Army. So they've been around, activated and deactivated, and they had, so in the last couple of years, they had an alumni association, which I joined, so I've been to Washington, D.C. and to Nashville, where I'm seeing people I haven't seen in 44 years. Right. But I went especially because Jim Christopher, people that work right with me on the machine shop van, and just being older and the Christian doctrine, you're not arrogant. You got knowledge, share it with people. See, some people, if they had this machine shop van, I've got the secret, nobody else can do it. Well, I just, help people out, trained Christopher and all that stuff, and got the maintenance tent for these mechanics and stuff. So, and they pulling a few tricks on Hibbler. People remember who I am.
So you've got, there is kind of a place for you with that group.
Well, they certainly remember. And Frenchy, the guy who started the website, see, I bought a computer and punched in LZ Betty, and up pops a website. Said, holy cow, I had all these pictures, so I sent him about 150, and he used a bunch. But he right away says, these are the best photographs I'd ever gotten from anybody. And I said, well, I'm using Canon FTQL single lens reflex, and I bought a few lenses, and photography was my hobby over there out of boredom, and I knew that after studying photography, you're your own worst critic, and you know that candid pictures aren't the only really good pictures. When you ask people to stop and pose, they freeze up. So, he looks at these things and gives me front page billing on the website. When you open it up, this is pictures provided by Larry Morris of the 864th Engineers. Shows the searchlight on the top of Whiskey Mountain up there. And I'd climbed this mountain 4 or 5 times on Sunday afternoons and stuff. People were, they just didn't want to do anything. I said, look, let's climb the darn thing. I said, Sir Edmund Hillary, Mount Everest, all this stuff.
So you climbed Whiskey Mountain.
This was people, when you climb up to the top of the mountain, these people were almost in shock that you showed up in their presence and stuff, which was funny because of the drugs and things. These people are living in holes in the ground up there. Stuff.
To have a tourist walk up by them is
we would come up there with a whole bunch of rolled up joints in our hands, and now we show up in the doorway, they look up and see somebody in an army uniform, and they don't know who it is. It could be a Sid. All
right. So it's on some level, no wonder that some of them can remember you from that too.
Well, right. So this is the normal life up there, what people are up to, and we climbed that a bunch of times, and I filmed off the thing, and we'd bring them food from the mess hall. See, in the mess hall, these people were enthused. It says, "Oh, you're going to climb the mountain." They had military had what they called a steak. Well, I think it was probably a pork steak. They looked like pork steak you'd buy in a market, something like this. And then people were living on sea rations up there, so you bring them some real food and stuff. So we got an old beer case or something and fill it. Mess hall, they go into the cooler. These steaks and stuff are meant for officer food. See? We don't eat these things every day. They do, but so they'd give us a box of steaks. We'd cruise up there, hand them, make friends with those guys and stuff. They were playing King of the Mountain every night up there. People were trying to come up the other side and things. And these people in the association are in contact with Jim Christopher. This guy is making another video or DVD about us, what we look like now. And John Waltz was left. He was there for 3 months after I was. He lives in Georgia. I never met the guy, but he's good on the computer. Just sent me a wealth of pictures and stuff of what things were in the later days out there and stuff. And yeah, that's Curtis Greenway. He was with the original advance party, and he left a month before I did, but he was the only person I ended up in Vietnam that they went there that I was with. I didn't live with him. He was a mechanic, worked on other things, but yeah, so we get to, you know, we got computers and iPhone and stuff nowadays, so we can just call them up and talk to them if you want to, which is much different than what people had in World War II experience. And even Vietnam was snail mail compared to what people got nowadays with modern communications and things. So yeah, that's why, you know, I got friends, but they're all in different states, and people are getting older and stuff, and a few people have passed on and things, so it's, you know, something to do. I just got all these slides and pictures. I photographed it, and then when you're almost 26 years old, your mind is just more developed, your memories are more clear. I can remember people's names and places. As you know, Greenway says, who was, you know, I put them over in for the guy. I says, Mr. Enders. Oh yeah, one officer, one bullet. Remember, yeah, little guy was 90 pounds or so. Yeah, so just being there and having just a memory, and then this is what just bothered you for a long time. Just missing these people. Some people says, you know, there's something different about you. You ever been in prison? No. Vietnam, possibly, and things. And even in this workplace, people, when they got problems of their own, so they, for a hobby or something to do, they want to pick on you and things. And no, these people ended up killing themselves. I had 3 or 4 people that were my nemesis for a while and things, but their lives were so goofed up to begin with that they ended it in putting pistols and shotguns in their mouth, or other people. You know, and you come back, and I had a few girlfriends, but every one of them had, the last one had endometriosis, so they don't have any kids. So people accuse you of being gay. I said, no, you know, you're talking to the wrong person. It ain't made my lifestyle, but you are yourself. You're trying to con me or find out or whatever.
All right, but you're, you know, I guess to kind of pull things together, just to kind of close it out here. I mean, you've had certainly an interesting life and set of experiences, and you've been able to bring in a lot of details about what the actual Vietnam experience was like from a different perspective than we often get. So I kind of like to just close out here by thanking you for coming in and taking the time to share the story today.
Everybody's story is different. You all couldn't be in one place at one time, so that's what I says, look, you know, on these November 11th, Veterans Day, and all these people that are running around with phony veterans, I said, look, just be what you were, and nothing more, nothing. Just wear, if you got a uniform, wear it. And the uniform shows you already what year you're in, because the uniforms have changed and things like this. But you know, we had experienced a lot of phony veterans when these Vietnam groups and stuff with people that were in the Navy or wearing camouflage and putting themselves in a cage like they were a POW or something like this. And there, you know, there's a cottage industry for quite a while. And people were selling macabre T-shirts with people with chains on their hands. It's, look, dude, even the POW thing, if you're a pilot or something like this, you're one of the king's knights. If you kill one of the king's knights, he just may take out a few power plants and sewage plants in your capital cities and stuff and cripple your society, so lay off. I mean, you know, you kill them, we're going to do something, you know, retaliate tenfold. So these people live. If you're a minor peon and stuff, this bullet for that AK-47 cost them $3.50 a piece when their year's income is $85. So if they're going to shoot you with that thing, it's about 8 or 9 days' pay. They hit you with a rock. See,
Unfortunately, you didn't have to deal with that kind of thing yourself.
Right, but I mean, the lower people were, and especially Vietnamese, were just killed with a shovel or a rock. They didn't waste a bullet on them and stuff. So, yeah, and you know, you hear that their stories. You don't hear, you know, like 400 or some POWs. But you don't hear too many stories of common people. Mostly, they want to talk about McCain or somebody like that, you know. No, from what I heard is if you got, see, if you're a prisoner, they need caretakers, somebody to take care of you, to feed you and watch you. And this is a pretty boring job. So they're going to hand you over to somebody. If there is nobody to hand you over to, even the person you hand it over to, it ain't worth their effort to take you up someplace else. So they just shoot you and junk you out for the clothes you're wearing and the stuff on your body.
Right, but that's really kind of outside of what your experience is, and that's kind of what we were focusing on here.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, they just being older and being able to, coming from a good place like Grand Rapids, when they put you in the military with all these crude people and stuff, it's easy to excel, especially if you have a skill or something, you know. So the military, things were going badly for them. So between Hibbler, they were just trying to retain anybody they wanted. And occasionally, you know, walk around Myers or so and you bump into people who are a veteran. And I've only run into 1 or 2 people that were my age when they were drafted. And they said, oh yeah, they offered me the world just to re-enlist. You know, but they say, look, you know, we're civilians, we got drafted, and the military ain't, you know, we don't plan on making a career out of it. But several people approached me from time to want me to join their unit, which I knew, well, this is not good. I said, look, dude, I got this nice machine shop here, even though it's old and antiquated, and I don't have to pull any maintenance on it here, and life's nice, so I ain't leaving, you know. But a few people, you know, come over and try to romance you a little bit for a while, and you know, just meant signing up with them into this equipment platoon or whatever they wanted to be head of or something. No way. And no, the war was going kind of badly, more or less, at the end, and we kind of knew nobody cared. I was talking about Colonel Houston, the teacher. So this guy he could rattle off every river in the country. We had a history book, and he divided it up into paragraphs, and you had to talk about this paragraph. Colonel Houston's room was completely oral recitation, where you had to stand up there and talk for 15 minutes. The colonel sat back in a chair next to Sue Rattless, this pretty girl, and he would just hold up 3 fingers, 4 fingers, you know, 0 for nothing, 5 for an A, you know, he wouldn't say nothing and stuff. So, yeah, but he'd make us recite the pledge, or the national anthem, the song. And this is, you know, the national anthem got 4 verses. We only sing the first verse.
But you had to remember all of them?
Well, part of in the second verse is fight we must because our cause is just is in there. See, and I'm rattling this word by the people back there, the barracks and the LC, and they're laughing at me and looking at me. Well, you kind of idiot or what? You know, nobody cared about this war. You're in the military. You're a prisoner with privileges. You know, you can't go wherever you want to. These lifers are mean to you anytime they are, because they do it because they can. It's just rag on you for something to do, and so, you know, you do what you want, but nobody knew this was a losing cause. You know, people are saying, sure, I can tell these people, I'm from Iowa, I can tell them how to grow rice and advise them. And, you know, no, these people, you know, politics is local. And yeah, drugs and these alcoholics and stuff. These civilian contractors and people, that village advisors and stuff. We lived with Floyd Muir and Orlez's helper. He was the air compressor mechanic, and they had to get out of California for a while. But Orlez, a few warrants for their arrests and stuff, so now they're over here. But no, Floyd, we had this thing on. Floyd was a homosexual. He didn't bother us, but in Orlez but Floyd had this Jeep painted Battleship Gray, which was a neutral. So he's a Vietnamese out there. It's not an Army vehicle or something. And he'd let you borrow the thing anytime he wasn't using it. He'd borrow his Jeep. So things were going pretty safe. I could drive back to the LZ without much protection. And I noticed this little doghouse building. It had big open windows in it. The guy's sitting in the thing at a table or something. And I've been by it a couple of times, but you know, it's American, you know. And I thought, well, I cruised by one time. I noticed it's kind of pretty good size in there. You know? So I stopped. Cruised in this little gray building, about 10 foot square or less. You know, he's sitting at a chair. He's sitting down, he's taller than I am. You know, this guy was 7 foot tall, 7'4" or something. I put my hand down. His hand is 3 times the size of mine. His shoes were 27s, special made. He was sitting at this table. He had a tumbler of glass, 16-ounce full of whiskey right up to the top, and a bottle of whiskey right next to it to refill it. The alcoholics, I seen a few ones that were in Ottawa Fireworks were that way. When I talked to them guys, or 2 of them, they had about 30 of their friends blown to pieces in these displays over years' time. And a girl I met, actually a Sue Morris, no relation, her grandpa lived someplace out where West River Road up the end of this hill, and Grandma died, and he was the same way, a tumbler of glass full of whiskey. And now this guy, you know, I said, oh, like, oh, what are you up to? You know, I'm a village advisor. They're just sitting there getting drunk and stuff, and he's so big, you know. I says, yeah, he says, yeah, that's why I'm here. I can't do anything. He says, machinery, I hit 2 pedals at one time. There's no machine I can run. Heavy equipment I can't run. I can't do anything. And he's telling me, he says, you know, and I was always this way. I was huge right in high school. And he said these high schools didn't have any coordination. His body is so damn big. Every time he told his hand to move, his brain, you know.
So it's somebody who really shouldn't have been in the Army in the first place.
Well, he wasn't in the Army. He was a civilian.
Okay, he was a civilian.
He was a village advisor.
Okay.
That's what he ended up over there, to be an alcoholic. And I asked him, he says, yeah, you know, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm an advisor to these people and stuff. I usually sit here and get drunk. And he said, yeah, you know, in high school I was uncoordinated. People used to mock me and stuff like that. And he says, after a year or two out of high school and stuff. He's downtown, and this little town had plate glass windows where you can see the reflection of yourself in the mirror. And a couple of them smart-ass kids across the street used to call him names, and they come over and yelled at him, "Hey, you idiot," or something. He went over there on the other side of the street and looked at these dudes and backhanded one of them, knocked him right through a plate glass window, picked the other one up and threw him through a window. He says that got him about 3.5 years in the penitentiary. Yeah, so he ends up out there, you know. Vietnam was full of, this PA&E was full of these alcoholics and rejects. Mm-hmm. We had this character, his real name was Dilly. That was his name. This sucker made Charles Bronson look like a Boy Scout. He wore complete black, had a cowboy hat, sour-bellied. He was the alcoholic. You know. It would take sometimes 5 or 6 MPs to throw this person into a Connex box. When he was drunk, he'd fight them all off at one time. And these Connexes are this 8-foot square metal box with the doors. Dilly would get really smashed and drunk and belligerent and stuff. You'd start beating people up. They call the MPs. You know, MPs would come and they'd have a giant fist fight and stuff. And
what was he supposed to be doing there?
He's a subcontractor, a civilian, worked for PA&E.
But, you know, mechanical stuff or other
yeah,
things?
I'm not sure what he did, but oh yeah, see there were all these goofy civilians that, you know, I said they ran off from the farm to join the circus, and they ran off from the circus to join the war and follow the war circuit.
All right.
See, and if they had to skip town, and then the corruption, see, Mark Elmo, I mean, talk about this character. See, Sergeant Patton, I got his obituary, he was about 43 years old when we were there. And he was this big black dude, this old rascal, you know, lived downtown, run all this corruption and stuff. And, but he favored white people. See, it wasn't this, you know, white people had more brains than some of these black people. A lot of these black people didn't have much education, so they weren't too useful. White people had more brains. They were running the smuggling, you know, all this stuff. But see, a lot of people were, you know, pot, other drugs and stuff like this. But they get an R&R for 2 of them. 2 weeks out of that year, they go on vacation. But a lot of people weren't leaving. See, this idea of going on vacation with no pot, what? You know, vacation. So they wouldn't go. So Elmo would take their R&R. Elmo lived in Los Angeles, which was an R&R center. So he would just go over and ask these people, going to take your R&R? He said, no, I was going to take it for you. Sure. He said, okay, well, what do you want back from the world? You know, I'm nice enough. So he would just go in their name. He'd go home, he'd be home for a week. He said he ate artichokes every day, you know, stuff, slept in his own bed. But then he would go down to these head shops and buy these zigzag rolling papers, but he would buy the entire box of 100, but he would buy the entire stock in the store. So he'd buy 10 cases or 11, 7 or so packs, 100, you know, zigzags, and we're out there in the mountain, you know, and up there in the guard tower and stuff on top of our bunker there. I got pictures of this thing, and this 3/4 shows up. It's Elmo. Well, he just come down from the track. See, we're in Phan Thiet, so he had to fly on down to see us and stuff. But he'd come out there, he'd climb up on the guard tower and hand you a fistful of rolling papers. I've been thinking about you boys. It's the least thing I could do, you know. I was back in L.A. So, yeah, all kinds of this stuff was happening. People you knew, you know. Elmo, literally, when we got there, you get these FNJs, people knew him. And, come on, we got to get up Sergeant Patton. We got to wake him up. We got to go get Sergeant Patton. It's 4:30 in the morning. He's waking you up already. We got to go out there and climb in his truck. Formation's at 6 o'clock. We got to get Sergeant Patton back here by 6. He's passed out. he drank a quart of whiskey the night before. He's laying on the front porch of this house in the middle of the Trang downtown. We drive down there with his 3-quarter, and you got to have 7 of us to lift him up. 1 under his head, 2 under here, 2 on his legs. We shove him into the back of that 3-quarter. He's unconscious. And he's our cadre. He's up in front. He's supposed to be our leader and shit. It took 3 people to hold him up. And this was an everyday occurrence. Elmo would be behind him holding him up backwards. 2 of our biggest guys had him under the armpits, and he would be standing up. He'd be standing up for 14 minutes or so. Finally, his eyes would open up. His eyes coming online, you know. I mean, this is what was going on in the Trang. People like this is our leadership. They're totally incorrupt. Then we had a first sergeant, and this guy was another old black person who just call him Top, and he was always smoking pot and loaded all the time. So people had, you know, things were happening. This war was an old industry. So people had all kinds of ways of getting around, and it's who you knew. And in my case, being down there on that LZ for mountain 11.5 months, I knew a variety of people, from fixing these door hinges. These people who sold weed. I got some pictures out there. There's Donald Hendricks, this other little character, a little suitcase with 2,000 joints, 200 packages of 10. He'd have some mamasan roll these things up in the Trang. This guy, no travel orders. You're going to go 180 miles with no orders. How's he going to do this? He's going to hitchhike from LZ to a fire base, from that fire base to another one, to another point. He don't dare say he wants to go 180 miles unless something's up if he's the next one over. And so sometimes it take them a couple of days to get down to the Trang, and they contract somebody to roll these things up, and then he come back, and if he's had them cost him $1 a pack, he was selling them for $2. And oh yeah, he's telling me, he says these fire bases are the experience of what this place is like. See, these places get attacked overnight big time now, so when you show up in the daytime, a helicopter lands and the stranger gets off that thing, people run out like it's the farm and stuff. Howdy, cousin, glad to see you, come on in. They got everything. They're gonna be real nice to you and keep you there as long as they can, especially until it gets dark, is what they're after.
So then you've got to stay there.
Right.
All right. Okay. We're kind of
getting 88 hits directly on where you're in.
we basically pretty much used up our studio time in here today.
Oh, okay.
But you've done a really good job of kind of laying in a lot of different kinds of materials. So
it was who you knew, and being the agent when I was, respect for age and the seniority. I got an Article 15 they were test firing these 50 caliber machine guns at these trees. We knew that Vietnamese sat out there and watched us, or spies. They couldn't hit the darn things very well. This is in the daytime, so I picked up a grenade launcher and fired the first shot and hit directly at that tree right in the middle. That's pretty good luck. It's like playing golf. So the second shot a little bit right, and the third shot. By the time I fired third shot with this colonel, one of them we kicked out. Who was that person? Arrest him. Unauthorized use of material and stuff, So I had to cruise up to the orderly room, these other sergeants trying to give me advice before I go in and see this old fart colonel. And I cruise in there into this room. There's these lines on the floor. We can stop. The colonel's sitting at his desk, and he had 6 people in there. 2 standing by the desk, 2 in the middle, and 2 behind me to watch, make sure I don't punch them out or something like that, And these people I knew vaguely, but they all knew that Morris was the first SOB out on this mountain. He's been here longer than anybody. And he got this Article 15 from this old asshole and stuff. I had to lean over and sign 7 copies. of that damn thing. I couldn't say a word to this person in my defense after you're dismissed. So I walk out of there, and these people that were sort of watching me in there, they are outside, and they says, "Don't worry about it. We already dropped it in the wastebasket." They never check on these things. See, and this was partially why Hibbler was after me. All these lifers knew that I was going up there, and I was going to lose that 5. Get that Article 15. But nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
And so now that's what made you suspicious. Who is this somebody? You know, he gets a 5, he gets more pay for it, gets to talk to a lot of people and stuff. When things broke down, see, I wasn't talking to a sergeant, some lieutenant recruits over, whoever was in charge of the operation, the asphalt plant, say, "Look, we broke the damn thing." I used to make pullers they had several rock crushers. One of them was a cone crusher. And this cone would get stuck occasionally, so they'd have to make a puller, pull the thing out, and you screw this thing back, and once they got it pulled out, they'd cut the puller part in half with a cutting torch or something. So once the thing was used once, I'd have to make another one. And but boy, once the rock crusher stopped crushing, they're over there right away, being real nice to you, and you're talking to these people. "How can I help us out?" "Oh, sure, you know, you make them apart, and a few hours later and stuff, they're all happy and run away with it. So, you know, you just got a rapport with these people, and other underlings who say, "Look, you've talked to these guys," and it was the same thing with the Orientals and stuff. The people that worked in there, they knew I was older by not much. These people wouldn't talk to nobody, but I could get a few words out of them. And Sergeant Patton, he lived with these Vietnamese, and these hoochmates, these girls, and you could fit 5 of them on a regular bed. We would sleep and stuff together and stuff like this. When they weren't washing their clothes, they would go pass out. They're like Mexicans, they take a siesta in the middle of the daytime. It's really hot there. And Sergeant Patton lived with these people. He's a big black guy, about 40 years old and stuff. And when he talked to them, these Vietnamese women, they were girls from 18 to 20 some years old and stuff. And English is, you know, they knew this language. And when he talked to them, he'd ask them a question. They would answer him back, but they sounded like 4-year-old girls. They had to choose their words in English, so it was slower. But when we tried to talk to them, say nothing, but Sergeant Patton, they would open right up to him. But of course, he lived with these people too and stuff, and knew to them. But other people says, "Yeah, Orientals do like black people." And so I got a couple of black friends, and he says, "Yeah," he says, Chris is about, I got some friends. I don't have, other than Army guys, I don't have any friends that are my age. People I work with, worked with, Brent Kettner, these guys are about 45, you know. My friends could have been my kids, or that, you know. That's the way it was in the dye shop and stuff. But,
Okay.
yeah, we had, this war was old hat, old industry, and there was ways to make money in this thing, the black market. Nobody much cared about the darn thing. And people were more or less, if you were in any place that was civilized, you were in it for yourself. Other people lived out in holes in the ground and stuff like this, had a much different lifestyle.
Yes, all right. Okay. And we do need to kind of close out here now. So again, just thank you for coming out, sharing the story.
Oh, okay.
I never seen such